All right, welcome, my friends. We're going to go with Cheryl Obermiller, the top 10 reasons why having a good bookkeeper might set you up for embezzlement. And this is going to be reason number one. Cheryl Obermiller runs Obermiller Construction over in Missouri.
Missouri.
I always want to say Oklahoma, Cheryl. And Cheryl is a crafty old veteran when it comes to being embezzled from. And so she had written a book, as you can see there, called Fraud Points, which is a hard copy. And it's a big, thick book with tons of case studies and just what happened to her too. It's nuts. So we don't want this to happen to you. And yet, unfortunately, ignorance is not bliss here. All right. So this is going to be topic number one. And I'm just reading directly from what Cheryl has direct experience with. So you are far too busy and important to mess with the boring paperwork, Cheryl. That's why you pay for your staff to do it, and they are great at it. So take it away, please.
All right. Well, this is what we get told as business owners. Don't waste your time doing the little stuff. Take care of your clients. Do what you love. And so we're always really relieved when we can hire somebody to handle paperwork. And that's great. The problem is you have to know what paperwork to delegate and what paperwork you've got to do on your own. We just tend to be so relieved that we just don't pay any attention, and we don't know what things we need to monitor, what things the accountant needs to do, and a lot of these critical functions just can't be delegated. If you have a lot of different people with their hands in your information and they're processing it and then bringing you very efficient reports to show you what they're doing, you are always going to be at the mercy of what they want you to know about your business. So, when you and I talked before, we talked about how important it was to get your own mail. So what kind of stuff have you found in your mail? What's in your mail you think that you wouldn't want somebody to handle? I know for me, I just got yesterday, and they're being shredded. I got 4 envelopes from one of my credit card companies because I have multiple cards at the same bank, and they all have convenience checks.
Yes, lots of convenience checks. Absolutely.
Convenient is that. So if what you now have is an accountant doing that paperwork, they are balancing your accounts, they're reconciling the credit card statements, they're paying the credit card bills, that person can write those checks to themselves and make a lot of money.
Well, the sad thing, Cheryl, just along those lines, the convenience checks are very convenient for fraudsters as well as you and I. You see what I'm saying? So that's the issue. It's like, and not even just business owners, just generally speaking, we get convenience checks all the time. And I'm just like, what if that got some Nigerian prince? You know what I'm saying? We're stuck.
Well, you are. And the thing is, if you catch them and they've been forged and you report them to the credit card company, then you have some fraud protection. Right. But if you've ever looked at how these frequently come, you'll get an envelope with your credit card statement. There's the cover page, and then there's a page with your charges. The very last page, probably behind a couple of pages of disclaimers, is a page with a convenience check on it. So you probably just, if you open your own mail, you may have just been handing those to somebody to write, and you don't even know that they're there. You're not really monitoring the credit card statement. If it says, hey, a convenience check was written, even if you think to ask about it, if they say one of the companies that we were paying doesn't take credit cards, but they take convenience checks, so I just probably, because you're busy and you trust them, you're going to say, well, that's cool, thanks for doing that. So there's so many things. One of the things I learned when I was embezzled was the importance of looking at a lot of your own paperwork. And so much of that paperwork comes in the mail that's kind of one of your principal places where you're going to intercept the paperwork right off and make sure that you get your hands on it first. But what you want to do, there are 3 basic things. You do have to delegate. You can't. And when I was, unraveling my embezzlement, and I sat down with the guy from the FBI, and he started asking me, well, who enters the invoices? Who cuts the checks? Who balances the checking account? Who gets the mail? All of these things. And I just said, can I not have any employees? I can't run this business if I have to do everything. And the fact is, you can't do everything. But you have 2 types of controls set up in your business. You have prevention controls and you have detection controls. So the prevention controls are usually pretty simple. You control the processes that people can do. You control the paperwork. So you get your mail. You're the first one that looks at that. You delegate it to other people. If there's something really sensitive and you have to hand it off to somebody else, make a copy of it. When I give something to my CPA, I got something the other day and I didn't follow this process and I knew better. I'd gotten a notice from another state saying, we didn't receive a tax filing from you for this quarter last year. I knew that we had, but instead of making a copy of it and sticking it in my file where I could know what I'd given off to him, I gave it to my CPA and said, like, what's up with this? And he said, well, I'll follow up on it, but I think this is what we already talked about, that it actually is an error on their part.
Yeah.
I didn't make a copy of it. And then when I talked to him yesterday, I said, I've completely forgotten what was that thing that I gave you about a tax file.
Right.
So if you do have to pass something really sensitive off, then make a copy. If they're checks for your business, somebody mails checks in, I immediately, in my hot little desk drawer right at my hand, have my stamp, says for deposit only, over Miller Construction, and I stamp it, and then I put it in my safe, and I enter it in the computer system as a payment, and then I make those deposits myself on a regular basis. Yeah. So nobody can interfere with that. It's so easy to pass all of that paperwork off, and it just opens you up for fraud. So you do have to have ways to prevent fraud and to detect fraud.
Detect fraud, absolutely. Do you have any examples? Like you said, you have some real, other than you, and I mean, I hate to keep using you as a real world example, but any examples in your research recently of some real world?
You can use me all the time. You know what they say, if you can't be a good example, you'll just have to be a terrible warning. So I'm doing my best here. All right. So this lady, now this one's actually from 2017, although most of the ones I pulled are very recent. This is a woman in Fort Collins, and she was stealing from a nonprofit because people don't care if it's a nonprofit. A woman owned Cantor owned Freelance Bean Counter, and she was sued by a nonprofit. She allegedly stole over $208,000 from its reserve funds, debit cards, and credit card accounts through more than 220 unauthorized transactions, including 106 transactions totaling almost 70 grand from one bank account over less than a year.
Whoa.
And now, so what does that tell you? Where did the system fall down? Well, if somebody had looked at the bank statements, if somebody had looked at the canceled checks in the back of the bank statement, if somebody had looked at the debit card or credit, all that stuff should come in your mail. Or even if it doesn't come in your mail, your bank accounts, your debit and credit card accounts, at the click of a button, you can get online and verify all that stuff. So when I read that, it tells me somebody was too busy to look at anything. They just handed it all off, and she committed this devastating fraud. And is this the one? There were a couple of them that I read. I'm not sure if this was the one.
Sounds like she had the nonprofit failed the prevention on the front end, but then they failed the detection on the back end. They were unable to detect it quickly enough before they got stolen from, allegedly.
Well, and here's the thing: something to keep in mind is the actual procurement of the money, the getting the money, is usually really simple. They get a check or they get into your bank account. It's really simple to do that. Yeah. The complexity, which also means it's generally easy to prevent if you know what to look for. So you're, not just handing everything over, you're controlling the processes. But stealing the money is simple. Covering it up is where it becomes complex. That's why you have to have prevention controls, which prevent an awfully lot of fraud. But you have to have detection controls to look for the kind of complicated ways that people will try to cover it up.
Yep.
People establish prevention controls and then they don't follow through with them.
That's what I'm saying. So
and you see over and over that a business will have established prevention controls, but they haven't followed through with them, and they didn't
They'll have
follow
the gate set up, but then once the fraud is in the gate, they don't know how to detect it. So it's got to be, like you said, it's a wonderful way. You're preventing the fraudsters from getting in, but if some sneak in, what do you have to detect when they're in there? For sure.
Well, even the prevention, though, people just, it's a nuisance. They don't see that any fraud occurred, but that's like saying, I'm not going to get a tetanus shot anymore because it leaves my arm sore, and I've never gotten tetanus. So, and then your mom says, well, you did step on that rusty nail a couple of years ago, but you'd had a tetanus shot. So, maybe it was a good idea.
Yeah, 100%.
So the prevention controls are really simple, but you want to look at the processes in your company that other people are handling.
Right.
And you need, okay.
No, go ahead. I was just getting ready to say, when you talk about prevention, it's kind of like, don't leave your keys in your car. Just because it didn't get stolen the last week doesn't mean it won't be stolen going forward. Exactly. It's common sense stuff.
And that's what I tell people, because, people are afraid to put controls on bookkeepers, people that they trust and they know. And, I always say, I have really nice neighbors, but I don't leave the keys in the Mercedes, So,
all right. So you want to go on to number 2 or anything?
Let me tell you real quickly. There's 3 things in this first step that I want people to look at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right on.
Okay. So number 1, look at the different financial processes in your company that other people are handling, that you're delegating, and just kind of think about all the things in, generally in the bookkeeping or financial segment of your business. Look at what things get done and who's doing them. Think about if you have established any kind of financial controls or oversight over those activities. And then I want you to think like a thief and ask yourself, what could somebody with this kind of access do, and how can I prevent it?
Yep.
And
like a thief, I tell you, that's no 100%, Cheryl. Keep going. Mm-hmm.
And that's really the key. Keeping in mind that the perception that fraud happens to IBM. Hold on. It happens to IBM. It's some super complicated computer hack is just not the reality. The vast majority of businesses that are embezzled are a small business under 100 employees is literally 100 times more likely to be embezzled than a large company. And it's usually something really simple that you've just given somebody else control of the process. So, number 1 is pay attention to the paperwork, delegate what you need to, but make sure that you have oversight in place. And the way that you establish really good oversight is to ask yourself, how could somebody steal from me this way?
Know what I'm saying? I mean, think about it. How could somebody steal? There's a convenience check. Could that be used against me? Inherently, obviously could, and you know it. But if you don't think about it, you're not going to recognize that could be opening up to significant fraud. Hey, stop. So,
and stop and think about this real quickly. If you went to the grocery store, and it's the grocery store where you've been going for 10 years, and the nice girl waits on, she's checking out your groceries, and she's checked out your groceries a gazillion times before. Well, you notice that the little pad, the display isn't working. It's blacked out. So you can't see how much your groceries are as they go through, but you're not really worried about it. And then at the end, she tells you how much it is, and you put in your credit card, and then she doesn't give you a receipt. And you say, well, I need my receipt. And she's like, this silly thing isn't working. I got the manager coming to look at it. I'm sorry. So the first time, you're probably just going to say, never mind, it's fine.
Right.
It starts happening every time. Now ask yourself, would it be okay with you? Would it be okay with you if you went to your bank and made it a cash deposit, and they said, we don't get deposit slips anymore. Don't you trust us? Well, not that much. I don't.
Especially when it comes to money. I don't. Exactly. Especially when this hasn't been fixed yet. And every other place I go, they have a receipt. You see what I'm saying? It's just like, all right.
So look at the processes, figure out how somebody could steal, and then take control of that.
All right, good. All right, hang tight. We're going to go to part 2 next. So hold on just a second.